Good morning, afternoon, evening, however you are joining us. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast presented by SFJ4x4.com. My name is Neil with Simpson Family Jeeps, joined in Grandma's Couch Studio,
Jeff Shermani,
the Italian Stallion,
and the mad scientist over there.
I'm just going to be quiet, I guess.
No, I'm waiting for you to say your name.
The maddest mad scientist, Scott Brown, and today I am a brake line, gas line router guy.
And you know what? It's important. I'm going to take a moment to recognize equally on the production side, as oftentimes I'll slander Jeffrey with, but I also want to recognize the Savage who appropriately goes out and tunes in everybody. So if you do come into our showroom during the live airings and whatnot,
You'll see a very awkward Davey.
Well, you'll see a Davey who runs the front end while we're doing that. But he turns on the podcast. So
I think he did already this morning, but it'd been really funny if we would have just saw him jump up and go running to turn it on.
I actually saw him, and he does every morning. I actually, as soon as we start, he goes out there and he turns it on, which is really appropriate for him to do. But I think he's out there, so he's likely hearing us talk about him while he's staring at a 90-inch TV.
Oh, well, and he does a lot of the post-production too, so we were actually having a conversation about post, about how our mic levels are not always equal. And the conversation was that as we're recording, I can't actually balance that because I don't get a good feedback, because otherwise we would have that little bit of an echo that it drives us all crazy. So I don't get the true the effect of what it sounds like live.
Sure.
So right now he's actually listening live and he's staring back at us. Because,
Hi, Savage.
because he's helping to make sure that our volumes are good for the audience.
So now I can tell him that there might be a tire delivery he might have to take care of.
You might have to take care of tires.
Yeah.
Sorry, Savage. I just remembered.
Good luck.
Does he know where the checkbook
I
is?
don't
Oh boy.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
So if you are joining us in your ear holes, thank you so much for being a valuable listener of ours, and that is obviously where the swath of our listenership comes from. Recently, as we continue to kind of review our metrics and whatnot, we see we're now in 75 countries around the world. Heard myself in German for the first time the other day. What was
That was German. Yeah, that was so. Apparently, with YouTube now, you can dub it into all the different countries or however many, I don't know.
Right.
But so Davey wanted to hear Neil in German.
Yes, go figure. So
Quite entertaining.
with that said, thank you for all of you who are listening to us. But you can join us live most Monday mornings at 10:19 a.m. and you can jump in the comments, which there is some good folks jumping in doing that at this time.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to the comments here because we got Joe O'Brien saying morning.
Good
Jagga
morning.
Jeeper saying good morning. Mike Mall saying good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Daddy Jeep says hey. Joe O'Brien, I beat Nate. And then Bill McWilliams, good morning. And Joe, you did beat Nate, but I'm questioning, did you kidnap him? Is he handcuffed in the back of your Jeep? Because
Nate's not even on.
He's not on.
And so I'm a little concerned that Nate is
We need to do a wellness check.
right underneath Joe's Jeep.
I know that you guys have been fighting back and forth who's going to be first every week, and he one-upped you with bringing us donuts, but talk about revenge. I don't know what you did to him. Robert is saying morning, and then we got James saying Army veteran dropping in. Can't wait to get myself my first Jeep in 41.
Nice. Very cool. Thank you all for jumping in and joining us live as we, as we talk about most things automotive and a little bit of our personal lives. And if you find some relative entertainment in that, you'll want to stay to the very end following the post credits, and we'll kind of update you, socially, emotionally, physically, mechanically, whatever's going in our lives at the end of the program. Today, we are going to be expanding upon the YouTube video that dropped on Friday, which is, trending pretty well at the moment, where we have an opportunity to look in at the potential future of Jeep trucks for, Stellantis and kind of, well, we're going to do a little speculation. We're going to kind of marry what we factually know, a little bit of historical context, and kind of daydream together of where the future may take us.
I'm just going to go back to the comments before we get too far into it. We got Bob Mikan saying good morning, Jeepers.
Good morning.
Joe O'Brien's pleading the fifth on what happened to Nate.
Fair.
And I wouldn't expect any less. And then Mike Mall saying, I have an 89 Wrangler, 22 Gladiator diesel, and a couple Grand Cherokees. I love my Gladiator diesel.
Amen to that. I can agree there. Good stuff. And we'll be talking about some of those, some of those makes, models, applications, but specifically focusing in on trucks going forward in the future. So I suppose without specific further ado, if you're not familiar, and it's kind of funny because I ruffled a couple feathers about a year or so ago, we did a pseudo review on the Jeep Gladiator pickup truck. And the funny thing is, I actually love the Gladiator platform as a whole for many reasons. Would I like there to have been other variations available to us as far as wheelbase, bed length, or cab design? Yes.
Yep.
But the vehicle as a whole is an incredibly fulfilling experience for me, despite the fact that I actually haven't personally owned one myself.
Nah, but you've been surrounded with enough of them.
I get to kind of have this experience of osmosis because I've loved Jeep pickup trucks historically. So anyways, I do this video which had a very divisive title, which unfortunately front-loaded people into a negative mindset. And so they got on there. It was a wildly popular video, but there was this misnomer that I don't actually like the Jeep Gladiator, which is not true. But, it's in the eye of the beholder.
Well, you named it Jeep Truck Suck.
Well,
so
that was Davey. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but
you know what? Oh, that's what I was going to talk about, the Savage. I was going to talk about the Savage real quick because of his Jeep Truck Suck concept that got me in trouble, right? Let's just call a spade at this point.
Well, got you in trouble, and you were using my Gladiator for the video.
Oh, yeah.
Luckily, I didn't get any of that
You didn't
backlash.
get
It
any
was all on you.
backlash. Yeah, no, it was all on me. It was all on me. I was, when I was taking a moment to recognize Davey, I thought it was so funny. I share this story. I had the most funny experience there's just two experiences about Davey that I feel like I have to share, and I'll keep them as brief as possible.
You brief?
Jerry
says good morning, by the way.
Good morning, Jerry. So as far as this weekend, I actually had an experience where an individual told me that over the past year and a half, they had been acquainted with somebody else and dropped the specific name of that individual. And that individual had said how proud they were of their grandson who was doing our media content, was, shooting videos and taking pictures and so on and so forth. And the gentleman that I was personally speaking to said that, yeah, this was somebody I kept running into over the last year and a half, hospital visits, rehab. He had a small stint in an assisted living to, kind of do some further rehabilitation services. And these two gentlemen had shared a bunch of time together. And this other gentleman that I was not speaking to was so proud of his grandson. So I get off, I get done talking to, the specific first person, and I call the Savage up, and I'm like, hey, I just wanted you to know that this guy is really proud of you, drop the name. And I was like, but you never told me that your grandfather was in and out of the hospital and yada, yada, yada. And here's his name. And Davey goes, I have no idea who that is. I've never heard that name before. I was like, okay.
Well,
so
he's proud of you.
There is a guy who's really proud of you. That is what it comes down to.
Well,
I don't know who this person was.
The best part is Davey could be the only person they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, there's nobody else that
There's
fits
nobody
the
else who's
description.
taking pictures, doing video,
Right.
and uploading content for us. So this is just him.
And it's Conneaut based. So
Yeah.
again, it could be you, Scott, or Davey at that point. That's only three of you, and
Right,
you
who
two
are-
aren't doing the
Who
media.
are local to this area, right? It was hysterical, and the Savage obviously. Yeah, I don't know who that is. Okay. The other thing was Davey took a call the other day. I don't think it was a walk in through the retail showroom, and they took a call and they were like, "Are you the guy who does the videos?" And of course, Davey was like, "Yeah, I do the videos." Right, but with not what they were asking about.
No.
They wanted Jeep insight and specific, consultation services.
They wanted to talk to you because you're the face of the video.
And Davey, the guy started to say something, and Davey's like, oh, you don't actually mean me. Like, I don't, I can't help you.
That's
That's so good. Okay, so speaking of the videos and the Jeep trucks.
well, actually, before we get to that, James is asking, where are we from? So I'll let you handle that.
Oh, James, we are physically located along the beautiful shores of Lake Erie. We're roughly 1 hour east of Cleveland, Ohio, and about 35 minutes west of Erie, Pennsylvania. Shout out to the third largest city in the great Commonwealth and Jeffrey's Homestead.
I don't know how it's the third largest, but we're going to go
Anyways.
with it. Sure. So I do want to point out that, again, back to the he can't be brief. Most people have been like, oh, we're in Conneaut, Ohio. He's like, I'm going to give you the full layout of the land. Here's the mountain ranges that you're going to pass on the way here. This is what the sun looks like when it's setting at this angle over the lake.
And he didn't even get the best one where we go to Butler and people are like, where's Conneaut? I've never heard of that before.
In the sharpest corner.
Harper's corner of Ohio. And my thing is, you go north until you fall in the lake, or do you go east until you hit the PA line and you're there?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
We're in small town America.
Throw a rock, you hit PA. It's
Yep.
that close.
Good old blue collar manufacturing. I like to call it the breadbasket of the Jeep, personally. If you go a couple hours to the west, we actually have the Toledo Willys Jeep kind of, bosom, if you will. If you go a little to the southeast, you land into the birthplace of the Bantam Car Company and therefore the conceptual design of Jeep in itself.
Now, James is saying he's unfortunately from California. Well, that's okay. We have California Jeeps here that we work on. That's a normal thing.
Come
for
visit us, James. Right?
And then Don actually just one-upped us, and he wants GPS coordinates. We have to have GPS coordinates next time.
Next time.
So there we go.
Next time. Perfect.
Now we should get into it.
Now we should talk about actual Jeeps and as far as the Gladiator pick 'em up trucks and an expansion on that. And so where this comes from, and if you see the video, just recently a email survey was distributed to a weird select group of people, right? And so we're going to present to you kind of the full concept, expand upon the nature of the video a little bit. But factually, an email survey from a group with the Jeep insignia at the top of the email. So it's, either we have a drastic copyright infringement or we have an authorized user. And it's kind of from the group that is touted as the Jeep Market Research Team. That is, it says the Jeep Market Research Team would like your feedback. And so it says Jeep. These people received this electronic email. They appear to be primarily recent Gladiator purchasers. So the idea that they've bought a Gladiator within the last 6 months seems to be the thing that unifies them the most. Doesn't really seem to matter if they... So it doesn't see anybody, oh yeah, hey, I just bought a Willys Wrangler or a 4xe Wrangler or anything like that. No, it was all, I purchased a Gladiator in December. I purchased it in, the fall, a month ago, whatever. And the email survey says, hey, it's going to be brief and we need to pick your brain on some design elements, basically. The email goes on to read kind of one of the first selections was a grill design. Would you like the grill design to be kind of your standard where it's based on a Wrangler or a CJ platform, right? So if we
the 7-slot appearance,
your 7-slot, you look like a Wrangler, or would you like more of the vintage kind of set apart grill design inspired from one of the vintage trucks? Think of the Rhino grill, which is my personal, or do they call it the bullnose for, what's the other, the wider grill design? Do you remember? There's a vernacular or a slang term for that grill design as well.
I always get them confused, so I don't even want to.
Yeah, because I know like we called it in the Jeepsters, we call it the bullnose Jeepster. But anyway, so if you like that grill design, or would you like the front end to look more like the Wrangler or the CJ?
This? Are we talking 63 to like 69 style grill, or are we talking 70 to 73 type grill?
All of those grills.
All of those grills.
All of
one's
those
a skinny one.
Correct.
That's 63 to like 68.
That's
69.
the Rhino grill.
And then we have my personal favorite, the 70 to like 73.
which is wide and narrow.
Yeah.
And they literally show both of those. Okay.
Yep.
And they show both of those, and they say, "Would you like the grill to aesthetically appear like this, or as is more of your iconic sharing a front end design as far as the CJ and the Wrangler platform?" And they show the front end of a CJ, which those of you listening would understand that the Scrambler was a half attempt at a pickup truck, right? Yeah. It was half build as a truck when it was released. But obviously it shared everything that a CJ 5 and 7 of that era had, but in a much longer wheelbase and a big booty Judy overhang that, you know.
And I think they're all referencing the contention when the Gladiator first came out.
Right.
That everybody was upset about the name. They said they should have called it a Scrambler.
Correct.
Instead of a Gladiator, because a Gladiator is a full-size truck.
And this survey doesn't bring anything up to do with Scrambler, but I think we'll talk about that in a hot second.
Yep.
So then that's the topic number one, and it's asking you to kind of rank your favorite grill designs. One of the options I saw was actually grab a grill design and throw it over here in this little box. One was just a checkbox to say, do you like inspired by a CJ or a Wrangler, or do you like it inspired by a vintage truck? The next one was integrated fenders versus not. So, the fender structure of a Wrangler or a CJ, which is what the Gladiator currently has, or an integrated, which is going to be your stereotypical full-size truck look where, you know, the fender line is all the way at the outside of the tires or the wheelbase itself. So do you want integrated fenders or not, was the secondary option on the survey. And finally on the survey was the power plant, power train options, which I will expand upon as we kind of move forward in this conversation. But I will tell you that they had 5 options available to choose from. One was a 3.6 automatic. Then there was the 3.6 manual, which ultimately they differentiated, saying that it had better crawl ratio and better usability off road.
Did it say it had a good clutch?
I did not weigh in on the clutch design by any means.
I'm sure they avoided that one.
Right.
I'm going to jump to the comments real fast because we had Roy Hill saying good morning and Scott Bennett saying good morning.
Oh, good morning, you guys. So they differentiate between the 3.6 V6 auto and then manual, and then they get into the 2.0, which there's a lot of people who are really jazzed up on the 2.0 as we know it right now.
I was going to say, it seems like there's a big push towards that 2.0 platform at this point.
Actually, I saw a number of people who had received the survey or who had said they would have liked to receive the survey, commenting that they would prefer to see the 2.0 in the Gladiator, which I thought was interesting. Now, I'm pro 2.0, but in general, as an engine application.
We've got the one customer, tons and 40s with the 2.0 and loves it.
Correct. And he's pushing 130,000 miles. He's driven it coast to coast.
Right.
Just wheeled the beans out of it.
Now, that's the Wrangler platform, but...
Correct. Because, of course, to this point, we haven't had the 2.0 available in the Gladiator. We factually only have the 3.6 and the EcoDiesel as production available power plants.
Yeah.
But they go through and they list a 2.0, and they talk about as far as the benefit to the 2.0 is concerned, a nominal increase in both torque, horsepower, 0 to 60 speed, and fuel economy. Honestly, the 2.0 outranks the 3.6 in both manual and automatic configuration significantly. They take it one step further, and they do not actually list it as e-assist, but there is the 4th option on the survey, which outranks all the predecessors of that, options, with massive torque, massive horsepower gains, a significant increase. I wouldn't say significant, but it's enough of a notable increase in 0 to 60 time, with about a similar fuel economy. And one can assume that is e-assist, right?
Yeah.
There was a number of people commenting on a number of forums, and they felt like they didn't see an e-assist. Well, I think you have to read between the lines. Yeah. You have to recognize that this 2.0 with horsepower, get off the line speed is not some magic for a 2.0, but it's an e-assist, because that's arguably exactly what the E does for the conversation.
Right.
And the final fifth option is the 392 6.4 Hemi, which of course is, just leaps and bounds. It's not even in the same league as far as torque and horsepower, but has a 30% decrease in fuel economy compared to.
Now, I was reading the comments when you were saying it. Did you say diesel was one of the options?
Diesel was not one of the options.
I didn't think you said it.
I expand upon it in the video to say that is actually what I would have liked to have seen. But what ultimately we end up seeing is largely aesthetic and what feels to be kind of an arbitrary listing of engine applications, because it does not give us the diesel, which is already or has been offered. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I think is just kind of fascinating is we don't see the 5.7 Hemi in any of these applications. Why is it that Jeep seems to be
all or nothing,
all in at the 6.4 and not in this, arguably tried and true 5.7 line, which we obviously equally have just heard is slated for production again. Now, if you're like most people, as far as just an average vehicular consumer, you might not even know or give a flying fig that the 5.7 was, air quotes, discontinued.
Yeah.
But like
it was a blip on the radar.
It was a blip on the radar, right?
Yeah.
We're going to look back.
We're done. It's over. Oh, we're going to do one more year for the remembrance of it, and then we're done. Just kidding. We never got rid of it.
And you know what the problem is that for the people who worked on that assembly line, for the individuals who are assigned to that plant, I'm certain that was a big deal, that they were laid off, they were on unemployment, they were sent home, there was negotiations. And so, yes, we as Americans should take notice of that. But realistically, on the bird's eye view of that engine platform, it never really went away.
History will tell us it never left.
Correct. And that's exactly right.
In the comments, Mike Mall had said, I get 25 miles per gallon every day and 32 miles per gallon on the interstate with the Gladiator diesel, which is why I asked you about the diesel. Giaga Jeeper said, was V8 an option? And then Jerry Huber said, no mention of the 3.0 Hurricane 6.
So then let's give credit where credit's due. And so Jerry brings up a valid point. And quite frankly, Rob Morgan is the first person commenting back on the video to say, hey, we're being teased with this Hurricane Straight 6, which is slated to, we're supposed to see it in production sometime. And no idea about the Hurricane whatsoever. 5 options, 2 3.6 V6s, 2 2.0s, and 1 massive V8, which seems a little bit overkill if we're talking about your daily.
I'm going to speculate that they've already decided that the Hurricane is one of the engines. These are, what other engines should we do?
Well, Jeff, I got to be honest. That's a great perspective, right? Because I'll be honest, that's not something that I thought of.
I'm taking the battered Jeep owner side and going, they took my diesel away. And
so, dude, Scott, I couldn't agree more with you, right? Because I say this a little bit in the video to be like, I waited 30 years between the Comanche and not quite 30 years, but, just under. In 92, the Comanche was discontinued. And in 2019, for the 2020 production year, we saw the launch edition, a select run of launch edition Gladiators be re-released. So just under 30 years.
It was long enough for the diehard Jeep truck guys to have to go find something else to buy.
Yes.
And yeah, some of them maybe bought a Ram. But like you said, how many are now Toyota drivers and that kind of stuff? And do you ever get those guys back?
Correct.
Well, and the comments are on fire. There's a few here. I don't know if it's Andy or James, but they're saying, I would imagine the 5.7 and 6.4 are very similar in cost when it comes to manufacturing, making the 6.4 the better option. Then we've got Nate saying, apologize, I got distracted at work today. We can start the show now. So apparently, Joe released you? Okay. The house man.
Joe's in the back. I'm sorry, it sounded like a Hollywood movie. Joe's got a pistol in the back of Nathan's head, and it was like, if you say anything, if this doesn't look normal, if they catch on, I swear.
And
I'll pull the trigger.
oh man, that's so true. That's literally what I'm picturing.
Right.
And then the houseman is saying the Hurricane. I'm sorry. We'll start with the 5.7. Probably all production going to the Ram Charger production. The number per year.
He's probably right.
He's probably right. He's probably onto something. And then he's saying the Hurricane is a trash motor so far. Dependability issues. Way too much plastic. All kind of long for the JLJT platform.
And then who's that?
Amy just said laughing faces.
Laughing faces. That's fine. That's fine. I just couldn't see whose namesake it was.
Amy Santoriello?
Yep.
I don't know.
She's also, I believe, out of the Pittsburgh area.
Oh, okay.
So the thing is, I want a straight 6, right? So let's just kind of put that out there. Is that like I can get behind those of you who are asking about the Hurricane and whatnot. Is I want a straight 6, and so straight 6s inevitably, as automotive enthusiasts, have a better initial torque gain because of the long crank.
There's lots of things to be said about a long inline motor. The you don't have piston wear because they're straight up and down.
Right.
You don't have you have a strong crankshaft, so you don't have the problems there.
But exactly what you just said about the discontinuation. If you think about the last time that Jeep made a straight 6, was 2006.
Yep.
We're just a little too removed from it as a technology, which leads us to, House's comment about reliability utilization, and it's just kind of mixed results right now.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, we all have to start somewhere, so one can hope that Hurricane engine will become a more reliable platform. If you think about the JLs, when the FAD was released, we had a swath of Jeeps that broke at the FAD. Mm-hmm. And it was like, man, history repeating itself from our CAD axle, which ultimately is the exact same technology, different terms. When I asked one of the axle engineers, he said, because all the engineers working on the axles right now weren't born when the CAD was in production. CAD, center axle disconnect, FAD, front axle disconnect, exact same technology. But they all broke there, and then they made them better. So one can hope that the Hurricane will be a valuable player. Why don't we see the 3.0 diesel as an option? I like Jeffrey's read on it.
I think hopefully that's one of the reasons that they've already decided. But they had issues with the diesels, so maybe they just are done with it for a while and nope, we'll leave diesel for the Ram. But I'm going to go back to the comments because they're very entertaining. Joe said I'm using a BB gun. And then Nate goes, Joe, they figured it out. I ain't no rat.
Perfect. Remember, folks, you can jump into the comments too and engage and enjoy and whatnot.
And not distract us.
Not all comments will get read, but
we do try to read the bulk of them.
We do. So the 5.7, and we come back to, I want to unpack Andy's comment and then circle over to House's again, because it is worth mentioning the whole re-release that historically, despite the fact that Dodge back in the day and Chrysler and the aftermath of what AMC left us in shambles were all related in the 90s, that historically a Dodge 318 or a 5.2 was not the same engine as what was in the Grand Cherokee's 5.2. Right? Fair assumption there. You could not take a Dodge 5.2 and just immediately plunk it down into a Grand. And it's my understanding that they actually came from separate plants as far as manufacturing were concerned. I cannot factually tell you that, but ultimately we had the Magnum series V8s, and that Magnum series was not what was in the Grands, despite the fact that we had 5.2s and 5.9s.
So
and
technically,
5.2s and 5.9s.
the Grands did have Magnums, but they were block castings and stuff were enough different to make it fit into that package that you couldn't just flippy floppy them. I mean, the same thing we saw in the Dub J's and the Cherokees with 4-liter castings. They made them specific for the accessory drives and stuff that they have. Now you can make things work if you're a mad scientist, but the hatch expect things to bolt in. That is not the case.
Well, and so I'm wondering if that is not kind of an extension of what both Andy is saying, is going, hey, is there a gain of fuel economy? And that would be what I'm reading in the lines. Is there a gain of fuel economy in the 5.7 versus the 6.4?
Probably not.
And that's, I think, ultimately what Andy would be saying, is there's not enough opportunity gain in the offering of two V8s that, to the credit of the 5.7 being consumed by the Ram market, but that those 5.7s are going to be produced in such a way that they're streamlined for Ram utilization.
I honestly think the cubic inch now has more to do with buyer confidence than necessarily power, because for the last 30 plus years, you could go get a full-size pickup truck with a 5.7 V8.
Correct.
Doesn't really matter what brand you have. Ford, yeah, they've had different stuff, but a 5.4 and a 5.7 are pretty much the same basic stuff. So anyway, I think that has kind of gotten it where...
Did he just say a 5.4 and a 5.7 were basically kind of the same stuff? Because that's what I heard, and I'm just gonna have to. I'm gonna have to
Not
apologize.
physically the same,
I'm gonna
but-
have to apologize for anybody who's listening who thinks that remotely a 5.4 Triton and
No.
a 5.7.
I'm talking about, you do the math and you
Oh, you're talking about
the
cubic inches.
Cubic inches.
All right, I'm back to cubic inches.
That's all I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yes, they're not the same motor.
Okay, I wanted to eat
That
the
was
throw up
close.
in my
That was
mouth from the
close.
Triton. No,
So,
I never thought that for a second
anyways.
that they were the same motor. That you were implying that, but I think that the Triton 5.4 was such a piece of dog poo. Never should have been in a vehicle. Should be at the bottom of every boat anchor utilization of lake, pond, or river.
That's why they called it a Triton. So, anyways, we got Nate saying, "I'd be interested in a diesel if we can do away with DEF, but that is a federal
Illegal.
regulation.
That's illegal.
It's a federal regulation.
I wouldn't know anything about it.
Nope, not a clue." Daddy Jeep is questioning the fact that I said distract us, saying now we're blaming him for the tangents. Yes, but they're welcomed. So is that okay? Does that make
Whatever.
sense? I don't know. We obviously are very easily distracted. That's
I'm a beacon of focus. I don't know what you're talking about.
So anyways, Nicholas is saying drop 1,000 horsepower Elephant in it and call it a day. Disregard the fuel mileage.
Exactly.
Miles per gallon. And then Fred Motis is saying good morning. Or Motice.
Motice.
My
Good
bad.
morning, Fred. The OG anything for a Jeep there.
So any which
Oh,
way.
wait. One more. The comments are really
Jeez,
going.
Pete, Jeff. Come on.
Nate says, as someone whose rig has mud packed in it everywhere, just chiseled it out of the rear calipers when changing the pads. I like the premise of the Hurricane engines, but wouldn't forced induction induce a possible failure point?
That is a question, and man, it's going to go back to this conversation about the quality control, right? Oh gosh, making the association. One of the things that has made the LS so incredibly popular within the industry for the last 20 some years is the fact that it had kind of a, by all definitions, kind of a bulletproof bottom end. You could get a lot of mileage out. It was very reliable for its type of construction, and then a significant amount of aftermarket support. So the conversation about forced induction is that smaller cubic inches / liters, smaller displacement with some form of forced power adder. Some form of power adder is the wave of the future. We've been trying to figure out how to have lighter, smaller, more fuel efficient power plants with this add-on, whether it be a turbo, whether it be some type of supercharger, whether it be some type of e-assist.
We grew up watching Home Improvements. We got to have more power.
Right. So yes, it does create these inherent kinks in the armor that kind of have to get worked out of the
like
process.
I was saying before, though, the reason why Chevy, they went from an LS to an LT kind of flied by night. You didn't even realize that they were an LT, the other day when we were discussing it.
Correct.
But they kept the 5.3
Insignia.
Going
Going
so
back
that
to
gives
your-
the customer confidence.
Going back to your 5.4, 5.7 association.
Correct. That's why the Ford, when they did the 5 liter, again, even though it has nothing in common
Right.
with the 5 liter they grew up with, there's a buyer confidence there because, well, my grandpa had a 5.0. This has a 5.0. So I think with the Jeeps, we've been robbed of that because our 4 liter just died and they put in 3.8s and 3.6s and that kind of stuff. But we're starting to get back into I had a JK with a 3.6 and that was okay. And okay, I had a 3.6 here and yeah, I had those problems here and there, but overall the experience was good. I think that's why if they're going to go with a Hemi, they kind of have a standard with the 392 and they go, okay, well, that has some buyer confidence. If we
Right.
go and throw a 5.7 in there, you're almost starting from scratch. That buyer has no idea, relative terms,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
of what a 5.7 in a Jeep means.
Right.
So there's no benefit there when you have a very marginal, probably fuel economy increase with the 5.7.
Right.
And I'm probably,
And you'd have to be retooling again. We talk about
Yeah.
that 90s Magnum platforms that you were talking
Yeah.
about. I just think it's fascinating because I think that in the Ram line, you can get a 6.4. Now, as my own consumer association and with no bearing or research here, the 5.7 is typically a 1500 and the 6.4 392 is typically 3/4 ton or better.
correct.
You know what I mean? And so is there some type of gain one way or the other that an engineer at that level is doing, or is it just marketing?
So in my experience, the reason why you see that with 3/4 tons, because now you're into a different weight class for EPA
Right.
regulations, and you are not penalized as much for the fuel economy decrease. It's the same reason why you saw a 6-liter in a 3/4 ton Chevy
Fair.
versus a 5.3. And then you throw it all out the window when you finally get a 1-ton van with a 4.8, and I never understood that.
Sure.
But,
Sure.
For some reason, Jeep seems immune. We don't have to play by those rules. I don't
Right.
completely understand that.
Well, I do know that the whole, because there was a period of time where the 392 fully outfitted, I think, oh gosh, it fell over that classification where you could do certain tax deductions. And so it just it went out the window as
Yeah.
far as that, this invisible line of federal regulation. I know that I believe the 4xe certainly went top the scales and moved over that level. There's something there. I remember reading about
Like curb weight.
curb weight, total curb weight. And then once you bump up that class, how then again, federal regulations do or don't affect that platform.
And honestly, my biggest contention with all this kind of stuff is we can bench race and plan what our dream would be 100%. Because, we go back, 2 years ago, I was on fire to buy a new Gladiator, and I wanted it to be a diesel or a manual. And when I went to go actually purchase that truck, I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And diesels were available, but I only saw one in the whole search I did, and I pretty much covered the state almost to find any options. So we can have as many options as they want, but are they actually going to produce enough and have volume enough that you can actually purchase the plan you want to have?
Now, I think that's interesting because we make that approach ourselves. That's our perspective. But I'm acquainted with a number of people who are going to the website and ordering a vehicle.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that there is a degree that oftentimes our manufacturers are catering first to that you can order it this way. Now, if you're patient enough to wait 6, 8, 10, 12 months for that particular configuration, I remember people putting deposits down on vehicles that weren't even going to be coming out for 12 to 16 months.
Yeah.
And with specific configurations. And I have, when I was first associated with it, it was 20 some plus years ago, and they had discontinued, this is quite crazy, discontinued the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme.
Mm-hmm.
And Oldsmobile had touted the Alero as its replacement. and I remember an individual who had 2 years prior to, so had been told like, hey, the Alero is going to be available in like 12 months. They were a Cutlass Supreme owner. They designed the Alero. They put their deposit down. They made payments on it. They got their date pushed back. It was 18 months, I think, from point of deposit to point of delivery, and got the Alero. And they were like, dude, it was like he was like the size of Texas. You know what I mean? He was so proud. He was so excited. Of course, the Alero was a flop in comparison to the rear-wheel drive. At that time, Supreme had gone to the front, but the kind of the
It was
heritage,
not what he was used to.
It was not what he was expecting it to be.
Yeah.
So long story short, I think that the manufacturers still do in fact cater to people designing a vehicle, because that's what the dealerships do. The dealerships arguably pick packages that they believe are going to sell in their local areas.
They need to do better.
But that, I think, then is the issue, is that I think a lot of dealerships have gotten lazy and they just go, give me your standard top 10 sellers. Give me your A line.
Yep.
Right. And they go, yep, check that box, versus back in the day, the owner of that dealership would go through and he would like, okay, I want to option my vehicles this way.
Yeah.
And so that's why in my own purveyance of old school automotive history, you would get these pockets of really cool outfitted vehicles, because the owner of the dealership would build or design and take an order of 5, 10, 15 of them. And then oftentimes, as an extension of that, he'd have somebody at the back of the shop who would give him a special paint job or throw a different wheel or tire on it.
And I do, to an extent, believe that still happens, because there's the dealer packages, which are customer preferred packages, that if you go in as a consumer, you don't get to option it that way without all the add-on expenses. Whereas they have, I want customer package B and customer package 2A. And then they've got this premier package perception
Right.
that is at a lower cost than if you were a consumer trying to build it.
Yeah.
So that does still happen to an extent, but it's more generic than it used to be.
Sure.
I'm going to go to the comments because we got a bunch of those again. Jeannie is asking what everyone's up to for April Fool's Day tomorrow. Then we've got James wanting a 1-ton Jeep with a 6.7 Cummins, making it a mega cab. I'm here for that.
Right.
Of course you are.
I mean, I'll still use mine like a 1-ton. I don't care. And then we got Houseman saying, spending that kind of money, I custom order and get what you want. He did that with his F-250.
And that's exactly what we were talking prior to going on air this morning about some of those creature comforts that you might want. But if you're buying on the used market, you might settle without, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of give and take. So as we come back to the truck offerings, right, and we get away from the power plant concept itself, I
have one more thought on that.
Okay.
Just because most people with a Gladiator are worried about towing, and we're already confused with the Ouija board of towing versus options versus what the truck is, kind of stuff.
It's
that
wildly diverse at
Yes.
Jeep right now.
I would love to know what those motor options do to the towing capacity.
Sure.
Is a 2-liter going to have the same towing capacity as a 3.6? Is the Hemi going to have the same towing capacity as that? Because now we've upped the weight that the truck weighs.
Right.
That kind of stuff. Is like, I'm kind of disappointed that we don't have any insight into what
And
they are
per
thinking.
that survey, again, and we're going to come back to that and just say that survey was just the 3 specified options. Now, I reached out and those options were 2 were aesthetic and 1 was power plant, powertrain, and performance numbers. They're what I would call highly superficial consumer statistics.
Yes.
Right? That is about a focus group and not about kind of the actual nuts and bolts of how the vehicle comes together.
This is more about, do we think these are things that people want or not? And let's see what the most recent buyers would have chosen.
And so I'm going to expand and just make it perfectly into the universe that they chose an echo chamber. This was not your standard, and you've done a lot of the at-home consumer surveys.
Yep.
You know, as a family, you guys do those things,
Yep.
right? You might be talking about dish soap that you've never heard about or something. They specifically chose to send this survey, from what we can tell, to people who recently purchased a Gladiator. So we've chosen an echo chamber population. Now, I've reached out to a couple acquaintances at the dealership level and at the what I would call the professional level, folks who are kind of got their pulse on what's happening in the Toledo proper, right? And a number of those people could not substantiate any type of, they had not received the survey or seen the survey themselves. They could not substantiate whether the Jeep market research team was a direct arm of Jeep corporate or Stellantis, or what is more common, it would be like a third party market group who has authorization to use the namesake. Right. So there was kind of nobody, and of course I didn't actually reach out to this fictitious Jeep market research. I shouldn't say fictitious, but I couldn't. I Googled, I did find a link to or an explanation on, I think, a Stellantis page, but there was no like, hey, reach out to these people situation.
And generally, there's not going to be, because they are almost always a third-party marketing firm that is hired as a consultant for this situation. Hey, do a focus survey for us. We want to know more about our market demographics. And they oftentimes are going to be focused within their current market. It's very rare that those groups are expanding to the general public, because they want to know more about the people that are already interested in their products and how they can please them and expand that.
I couldn't agree with you more in that sentiment. And so I think we're seeing the kind of a generalized extension of a mid-production change, which we see constantly, not just in Jeep, but in arguably all manufacturers' attempts to reinvigorate their base, right? What I think is important is also to look at the, when I say look at the negative, I mean, look at what's not specifically being said. They didn't send, within reason, the survey out to people who have a Jeep registered to them within the last 10 or 15 years, or a 10 or 15-year-old Jeep, even
not even just Gladiator owners in general, because I bought mine brand new in 21 and I didn't see that survey.
Sure. So we don't exactly understand why they reached out in the manner in which they reached out, or who was even the ones who was reaching out. But
I think it's specifically focused on, hey, you just bought this. What would have made your purchase better? Would you have liked it if you did this? Would you have liked it if it had that?
right.
And it's because your nostalgia and your emotion of buying it is all right there and present. So you're really invested in answering that survey right after you buy it, rather than 3 years later, hey, what would you have changed about your purchase? If I had the Jeep for 3 years, I've done this and that to it. What do you mean? You know, there's a big disconnect there.
Sure. And I think that, but I think what I wanted to share and say that, you know, with that potential disconnect or with that longevity, as a person who is an enthusiast of, you know, CJs and maybe J trucks, or maybe they had a Grand Cherokee in the 90s. We've learned some things and we would like to give some additional feedback. As you're saying, they're kind of jumping on the enthusiasm of a current market consumer,
The new buyer.
and what would have inspired you further.
And I think the other part of that is, as a new buyer, you're more likely to still own the vehicle versus sending that survey out to somebody that bought a Jeep 5 years ago.
Also fair.
You just bought the Jeep. You're going to have the most insight on what it was like in that buying experience.
Right.
How did you feel when you saw this Jeep? How did you feel when you saw that this one had this color fender flare and this one had the black flare? You know, you have more of that readily available, that emotion,
Right.
the raw emotion.
So with that said, as I kind of talk about in the video, is the Gladiator is largely in a what I would call a saturated class. Now, it's not exactly as saturated as the full size class, because, you know, realistically, once you move into the full size class of pickup truck, you have, you know, you ultimately have then your half ton, 3/4 ton, and 1 ton insignias. And so in theory, if we look at all those as separate packages and entities and capacities, all of a sudden now GM has, I don't know, 11 different options, and Ford has, you know, 37 options that none of them work. And then Ram has 2. And so, you know, so that becomes a highly saturated class. The midsize has a lot going on, and the compact class is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
Which is
At this point, yeah.
which is a conversation about the consumer, the Western consumer market as a whole, because there was a time where our Ford Ranger, our S10s, you know, our Comanches, the Toyota, the Nissans, the Volkswagen Rabbit, the Dodge Dakota. I mean, that was a large class.
I mean, we're talking even in the last 20 years that was very popular.
Even, yeah. And it has only decreased at this point. And there are still some really solid vehicles available in the compact class of sorts. It kind of pains me to say that. Maybe not. But
I would say
it's
that
not
everybody
well represented.
The compact class morphed into the midsize class.
Yeah.
Right. It's this heavy midsize,
And
you know,
and arguably,
or heavy compact, and now it's this small midsize.
I would have just never would have expected this, but just the fact that I have a 68 half-ton pickup truck and we have a 79 half-ton pickup truck, and got them all together, and I'm like, holy crap, the Gladiator's just about as big as those trucks are.
It really is. And
just
it's honestly
nuts.
probably a little more capable in certain situations.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, my half-ton pickup truck, I think it's rated for 6,000 pounds towing. Gladiator has that over on it,
Right.
by 1,000 pounds.
What's the payload on your half ton versus your Gladiator? I bet you they're the same.
I don't know.
We're pretty close.
Probably.
And it's funny how our industry has morphed in that sense that we have once a half-ton truck from 50 years ago that basically is shared with what we consider to be a mid-size truck. And now, I mean, honestly, the expectation out of an F-150, which is the most popular selling truck in the nation, I mean, people.
Man, that was hard for you to say.
It was challenging to say that out of the F-150. It's when we get into the bigger Fords is when I'm more tolerable. But
Well, the best way to sell an F-150 is make it look like an F-250.
well,
That's also true.
I just see the F-150s being picked up by every Instagram influencer right now to tow their camper across the country, and it's like. Before a half-ton truck, you had to have a camper special. You had to have this, that, and the third. No longer are they pursuing the 3/4 ton or bigger trucks. They're trying to get everything they need out of a half-ton.
Well, and
that's what's interesting.
Nate says it really well. The mid-size truck class is pretty saturated, but they all perform about the same if you're doing truck stuff. In his opinion, the Gladiator is the easy front runner because you also get the solid front axle and it's a convertible. So, I mean, we're here. That's why we have ours.
We're biased, and that's the thing is that's why it is a 100% standout. Now, in the heavy truck class, if we look specifically at the 715, right, and the J truck went to a traditional solid cab design, but the 715 was actually a 1.25 ton Insignia. Now that was largely made for military specifications, and it was a dog that couldn't get out of its own way even if you kicked it in the tail, right?
Because it had the god-awful straight six
Which-
overhead cam.
Yes, which was also called a Hurricane at the time, which is not to absolutely be confused by the namesake and whatnot that we're currently using, which is funny. It also had a super, super deep gear ratio. It had beautiful ton axles in the sense that they were robust, but they share very little with other ton axles of the same namesake. And so they're not particularly desirable in the grand scheme of things. But it was a convertible as well. And so we have this proven recipe that the manufacturer can prioritize the fact that we want to strip the cab off.
Not just the cab, but to have the doors off too and to be able to tow at the same time.
Well, that's your Gladiators. The 715
I
had
know.
to have the doors stay on.
But I'm saying for the Gladiator market currently, and,
Sure.
and where we're going to go next. And with the last 5 minutes here, we got to talk about where do we think that Gladiator is going? What do we think it's going to look like?
I think it's going to look the same.
I hope they don't mess it up. And if they do want to go with
I don't want to see the built-in fenders that you were talking about.
well, if they do
Integrated.
offer it as a separate line item.
They're not going to. It's going to be one or the other.
Yeah.
So I want the Gladiator. So here's the thing. I think the damage has been done. I'm going to use that term and say that the namesake of the Gladiator has been
that
done.
ship sailed.
That ship has sailed. We messed up and we named a vehicle that should be called a scrambler, the Gladiator.
Yep.
It's whatever. And as a diehard enthusiast and lover, I can admit that, right? Admit when you're wrong. I want to see a J Truck series re-released. I want to have it. I want to have integrated fenders. I want it to be a full-size application.
I'd be on board for that.
A couple people, in the comments or in feedback had said, well, that's what we have in the Ram line. I'm not satisfied by... I can buy a Ram. I do own Dodge. I do own other applications. I want to own a Jeep. I am a brand loyalist in that sense. Now, I don't need it to have... It could have a 5.7. It could have a 392. I kind of don't care. I'd really prefer it to have a diesel in it. And I'd prefer it to be a bigger diesel than a 3.0, personally. Yeah. But I want the vehicle to be branded Jeep. I want to be able to hook up a gooseneck trailer and haul some farm equipment around and haul a Jeep or two to go wheeling. I can agree. Folks who
And
are
are
coming
you looking
in,
for the 2-door, or are you looking for?
I want both options.
Yes.
Now, I'm not.
They're not going to do both options.
I understand how the market consumer, and we often talk about this internally to say that we can offer this array of things, but realistically, the average consumer is only going to ask for this stuff. If we give them too many options, it overwhelms them.
Rock D Block is asking if IFS is in the future.
Oh, that's one that's always been debated, and that I feel like just should be its own separate entity. But I will say for this time frame, we need to stay the course with solid axle. We know and understand solid axle. Dodge owners have been dealing with death wobble, and so have Ford owners. We understand what comes with solid axle and poor modifications and so on and so forth. Because that's usually why people throw IFS into the equation. Be like, well, it's going to ride so much better, and it's going to, not have the death wobble. And it's like, okay, cool, I get that. But Scott's conversation about consumer confidence.
Yeah.
Just give me the solid axle, call it a J truck, let me strip the cab off of it.
I think this is the best way to leave this. So I have two friends. One has a Chevy 1500 with IFS. The other one has a Ford F-150 with IFS. They both said my truck rides nicer.
Huh. All right. And the last piece, and I know you wanted to leave it on that, I want a compact truck because, quite frankly, Jeep, if we would just get back to our roots, get back to the basics, if we could just kind of give us a stripper package with a single cab and a bed and an engine and solid axles, we would dominate the compact class.
Now, just so that the listeners that don't know what a stripper package is, you want manual crank
I
windows,
want a pole in
manual
the bed
locks.
with a disco ball. And
No, that is not what.
no.
That was SEMA.
All right, folks. Not us at SEMA.
No.
Get your heads out of the gutter. There was a truck parked in the parking lot that had all of those effects on it, folks. That's the rest.
And everything you would expect to go with it. We'll just leave it at that.
In a dream world, we'd have one in each class. Leave the Gladiator alone as it stands. It's a cool, good truck for a mid-size class. Great off-road rig. Give us a base compact truck. Give us a big full-size
Rock D
truck.
Blocks on board with the solid axle J truck.
Amen to that. Folks, this has been a great time. If you want to hang out and hear what's going on in our personal life, please stay tuned through the outro. Otherwise, have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week. Jeep on.
Jeep on.
Jeep on.
Rob, you're going to make me comment, and we're supposed to be done with this segment. Yes, I want a 2-door Gladiator as well. Mid-size truck, same as the 2-door JL. It'd be super effective. Just give me a nice bed on it.
See, the only thing I wanted out of my Comanche that it didn't have was more cab room. So I'm here for the 4-door.
I always wanted a 4-door. I desperately love a 4-door, but
In today's society, with all the go and stuff, I think the 4-door is just going to
You
do
just
better,
always
period.
want what you can't have.
and,
Right.
and that's fair.
Yep.
And that's fair. I had a pretty big weekend. I had a Jeep adventure, and it's just a road adventure. I was actually thinking about it last night and this morning, and it goes, sometimes about that Jeep life is just like even just kind of as that Swiss Army knife, it's kind of a road warrior experience, right? Just like going and adventuring. And I just had the best time with my son, kind of kicking him out of the house as far as he was on spring break this week. And he spent a lot of time, more time than I'd like indoors, but he's a pretty cool kid. And I got him out and I said, let's go do some stuff, and so we went and picked up supplies for working on the house property and, a couple other odds and ends and stuff, but just went exploring kind of the southern end of the county and just went to some interesting places we've never been before, and just kind of the cool predictability, reliability of the Jeep. I like the ride. I could have done what I did this weekend in a car per se.
Yeah.
But I found myself going, that's as important. We oftentimes talk about these big aspects of off-roading, of overlanding, of doing things that cars can't do.
Yeah.
But we don't often talk about this is doing something that a car can do, and I'm just enjoying myself more.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I thought maybe we should talk about that in the future, but for the here and now, that was a big part of my Saturday, was just getting to spend time with my kiddo, doing some Jeep adventures that really, again, I could have done it in a car, but it was more enjoyable because I was doing it in a Jeep.
Yeah.
You know? Additionally, obviously we had a banger of a weekend working on the homestead. We've got some pretty big goals in place for the spring into the summer. As far as that is concerned, Jeffrey was there helping do some of the housework. Jason, the Angry Turtle, came up. I haven't seen him in a long time, so we got to reconnect and have some nice time hanging out, working on the house. So I had it all around a very fulfilling, you know, kind of appropriate weekend.
Yeah.
You know, not too over the top and certainly not without some good Jeep specific fun in the process. Yourselves?
I did a bunch of maintenance on the Jeep on Saturday after
Yes,
after
you
shop
got
hours.
kicked. You got kicked in the knees.
Yeah, I was like, hey, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna do my oil change, do my tire rotation. I'm only a little past due from where I want to be normally, and grease up the long arm joints. You know, I was just like, I'm just gonna do some maintenance. And as I'm underneath doing the grease on the joints, I'm looking and I'm like, that's a lot of oil under here. What's all this oil under here?
Mm-hmm.
And then I went, no, it can't be. So I real quick jump up on top of the engine, look down in the valley. Sure enough, it's full of oil.
Mm.
So I now need to do an oil cooler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was nerve wracking because when I pulled the dipstick before I drained the oil, there was nothing left in there. 1,000 miles ago, it was fine. I had checked it because I knew I was cresting where I'm uncomfortable and like to do my oil change at. I pulled the dipstick. I'm like, good, I got plenty of oil, no worries. Fine. So in 1,000 miles, I drained the oil. And I went, that's not good. But I was thinking it was the burn-off situation that we've seen once or twice before. I've seen it once in my Jeep. We've seen it once or twice in other customer Gladiators.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't too concerned until I realized how much oil was underneath, and I went, oh boy.
The truck's just trying to preserve itself.
Yeah, and so I did.
It's a feature of Jeeps. Self-preservation.
And I was very concerned about the fact that, it's not a sloppy oil change that there's oil in the valley, because I always, when I go to take the filter out, first thing I do is I stuff a rag down around the oil housing so that if there is any oil dripping, because there almost always is when you pull that filter out, that it doesn't go down in the valley. So I definitively know that this filled valley is an oil cooler leak, and that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I've got that ahead. And then, you know, I had my 12-inch Delta planer that I bought in 2000. I've never changed the blades, never maintained it. And
Might as well be Scott's lawnmower.
yeah. So things still ran. It's still kind of cut.
Kind of.
I
don't know how.
I don't either. Once we got the blades out, and my neighbor had borrowed it, and he tried to switch the blades and stripped a couple of the bolts. Not a huge deal. Whatever. I'll fight with it. I had heated. I used penetrating oil. I did everything I could to get these dang set screws out. There was the two that he stripped that I could not get out. Called Scott up, and he said, bring it on over. So we went over Sunday, and I worked on that with him. And he was like, oh, it looks like we're cutting it. Well, it looks like we're welding it. Hey, good old Scott. I mean, if it's a metalworks project, there's cutting and welding involved. So that's what we did. But there's no blade left. I don't understand how it was still kind of cutting.
I mean, the best part was when you put it on the flat surface and it was a U. And I'm like, oh, flip it over now and see how bad it is on the other side. And you're like, well, it's never been.
The other side hadn't been
ever been used. And I was like, no, he's got it hot, or somebody's gotten it hot enough. That blade's not flat anymore. And it was not.
I think it's just a perfect example of just because you can doesn't mean you always should.
Oh,
right? And so that planer had been in use recently.
Yes.
Because a neighbor was using it or borrowed it.
Yeah.
And it's a concept of was he doing something with it? Yeah, I mean, he probably got some board out of it, but it could be so much better.
It had a lot of the sipes in it and everything, the boards. And I'd used it quite a bit within the last couple of years as well. And I knew that I needed to do something with the blades because of the amount of siping on the boards and everything.
But you still were able to, right?
I was like, I can sand that down, whatever, you know.
And that's the challenge with a professional approach is just because we can doesn't always mean we should.
Yeah.
I mean, sharpening that blade is the difference between that highest, most precision process and job.
Right.
And it's like, hey, I've been using it for a couple of years. It's kind of good enough.
I
And
mean,
it's
there's
like,
an argument that if you plane appropriately with good sharp knives, you don't have to sand afterwards, and it's almost a better finish.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that argument. I think fine sanding is going to get you a better finish.
Well,
but
how
there
long
is
have you had a belly though? with the blades
Correct.
in there.
correct.
So-
It's been 20 years since I've had a good set of knives in there, apparently.
Yeah.
And so who knows, what kind of difference that makes. But and obviously thank you, Scott, for helping fix that and get that resolved.
Meh.
Now I've got to find some bolts to replace those, but besides the point. And
It's a part. That's
it's
all
a
that
part.
matters.
Yeah, it's a part, and that's 5 steps ahead of where I was.
right.
And then obviously right afterwards I came over to meet up with you and Jason and had a good time doing that.
We did. We had a nice time. And I also failed to mention though that one of the things that it was fun, I kind of brag on my wife was she was running the backhoe this weekend.
Oh.
So you should, for those of you, I talk about her with enough frequency and her mall crawler, her fake Jeep, and it's pink and it's accessories, and if she can bedazzle anything, basically she will, and glitters and sunshine and roses, and then she got in there and she just started
But she's
hammering
not
away.
afraid to work.
No, she's not afraid to work. She got in there, and so before Jeffrey had shown up, she was testing her skill at a more. So the first day we started her on the backhoe, we were just kind of practicing, you know what I mean, the hydraulic movements and everything. And then yesterday she was trying to do some trenching for us. So kind of fun I needed to throw out there as far as when Jeffrey came over to work on the house. We had a pretty decent little work party because she had been there, and then Jason was there, and then
Yeah.
Jeffrey was there, and it was just a nice day. Scott, you tore apart your mill.
I
We
did.
certainly saw that on the social books.
So Saturday I tractored and cleaned up a bunch of steel from the building,
Okay.
and that was pretty good. And then Sunday,
Did you haul it in, or did you just kind of pile it?
I piled it on the trailer, and then I heard you in my head, and I was like, I'm probably going to get like $35.10 out of that.
Absolutely.
So I messaged one of our family members, and I was like, hey, do you still need random steel for your animal enclosures? And he's like, it was silent for a long time. And then I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep piling stuff on here. So all the bent stuff, all of it, don't care. I'm literally smushing it down with the forks,
Oh God.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Had Amy come out, we strapped it all down. And then he replied, yeah, well, now you're getting everything.
Oh God.
So I dropped that off Sunday morning.
Nice.
Went and got some snap rings and stuff. And then I was tearing apart the mill trying to figure out what was going on. And the more I tore it apart, the more bad stuff I kept finding. I was like, I'm missing snap ring here. Oh, that bolt's not right. Oh, look, this one's over here. This snap ring's been bent. That's not right. Oh, that's been apart before.
Here's the thing, and I need people who may be listening in, because I certainly didn't have a concept for it, and I'm more apt to be interested in this stuff and understand the mechanics behind it. But you had one down function working, and that's basically what everybody who had been using this mill prior was using. And there's this more of a precision descending
Auto
motion.
descent.
Yeah.
And that's so one function wasn't working. And so this is not something new. It's just
No.
you were kind of digging in to go, how can I make the most out of my machine?
So there's a couple different things you can test, and it's like you have movement here, but not there. It's probably this. And the diagnosis was it was probably a roll pin or a key that had sheared. I'm like, well, that's not that bad. I can tear that apart, fix it, and put it back together. No, that was a gear that literally exploded. It had been ran like that for so long that the key had destroyed the shaft. Other things had seized up. So at this point, it's almost a bare housing. I've ordered a couple $100 worth of parts, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, folks, we had a rip-roaring time with you today. We've got a lot of Jeeps to touch, number of things to do here in the coming week, and we'll touch back in with you next week. Until then,
Jeep on.